Hey everyone. So tonight I'm going live with Brian. I pulled out some more of these kind of crazy old-timey clothes, although, like, not gonna lie, I'm wearing it with jean shorts right now. But Brian and I, we haven't chatted with each other for a while. We used to do every single week for pretty much all of last year. Maybe we stopped like in the fall. We used to do a new segment called Counter Thought Rundown. He has an awesome podcast. It's called Counter Thought. And here he is. What's up? Oh, look, you wore a costume too.
I heard I heard you're a Fed, so I'm trying to protect my identity.
Oh, gotcha. That was funny. You already had that, you already had that ready to go. I thought maybe you saw my crazy shirt and decided to put it on.
Oh no. We have a costume bin at home.
Yeah.
And I was trying to look for like the glasses with the little fake nose and mustache, but we don't have one of those, so this was the best I could come up with.
Oh, that would have been hilarious. I love that. Okay, sorry. I'm just adjusting. I hadn't done a live with somebody else on here for like a bit.
You're
And
looking very I guess pre 1800s and before.
this is like 1776 here. Okay.
Very colonial.
Yes. I ordered all this crazy stuff. Is this a replay from Halloween? No, I just put this on because I put on that other dress earlier. And I was like, you know what? I want to wear the crazy shirt in case I don't end up doing any photos in it. So, but yeah. So, okay, what are we talking about anyways? I didn't really understand. We're talking about politics. We're talking about like what, growing the movement or explain.
Yeah. So, I know we were supposed to have this live, I think, like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But you had or still are having whatever, you were getting all that hate on Twitter from the Mises caucus and all that stuff. And then you were talking about messaging to that one guy who came on a live with you or whatever, and Clint, I think his name is.
Oh, goodness.
And we were like messaging, like there has to be messaging. Yeah, you can have a platform, but you need to like make certain adjustments to your messaging to appeal to more people, otherwise you're like not going to grow the party and all that stuff. So that's what I wanted to talk about. It doesn't even have to be like Libertarian Party messaging versus Republican Party messaging. It's just like political messaging in general, and I guess in our opinion why it is I guess prudent to do it and things like that, and the benefit of it. So
I wish. Okay, so I tried to set up StreamYard earlier because I was like, in part of my vow to step up the quality of my videos and stuff, I was like, I need to start making stuff in StreamYard and being able to like play a clip. So I'm going to have to go to YouTube. Like, it's just going to have to be on YouTube. So you can stream on StreamYard, play a clip of what you're talking about, and then like go back to it. So there was a clip over on Twitter today. I screen recorded it, and part of me was like, make a reel of this and share it. And then the other part of me was like, you're so salty. Like, just stop. Like, you just need to stop. 100 other people already shared this. Let them do the dirty work. Like, you don't need to get involved anymore, you know?
Yeah.
That part of me, like, put it back, like, just left it in my camera roll. But basically, it was Mike Heiss, who is like the Mises Caucus founder, chairperson, the person who's most contributed to by their donations also. or their funds. He was saying, gosh, let me try to remember exactly what he said. It was so graphic, so I have to remember it, but then like edit it in my mind so it comes out like a little more PG. But he was like, oh goodness. He was like, every state that we bang really likes the, sex organ or something that we bang them with. So he was saying that, let's see, don't platform your enemies. Yeah, sorry, I know. So he was saying that, like, in much more graphic terms, like every place that they go, basically what he was trying to say is like every state that they take over, the Mises Caucus is happy to be taken over, like grows really well or whatever. But I'm like, he said it in such graphic terms, I was like, vomit. You know what I mean? I was like, that's so gross. Who's going to want to be taken over by you? Like, I must send the actual clip because you'll be like, ew. I mean, but basically was like, I don't don't know. But
Yeah.
so my point is that that's not really a good look to a party, in my opinion. It depends on what your goals are, though. Like, is your goal really to bring in voters and win elections? Because if so, I don't think that that's the way that you talk. Now, if your goal is to bring attention, bring donations, make yourself kind of like king of some niche or whatever, then I guess that works, you know, depending on what it is. But as far as actually, and I talked about this in a couple of different lives, not the one with Clint, but I think it was, I don't remember who it was with, but anyways, it's just like me when I worked in the hospital. If I was like, hey, you know, MFer, I'm a do this procedure on you, you know, you know, I'm trying to like sound like they do or whatever. But if I was like, I'm gonna do this procedure on you and, you know, it's gonna be stupid, like I'm gonna do a good job, you know, whatever. And I had like tattoo showing and I was like vaping or something like that. And they were like, you know, the patient would be like, like, do I feel comfortable to have this person who's like swearing and stuff about to do this procedure on me? Probably not. Like, they're gonna want someone who's like, hey, you know, they come in real professional, using like professional language, and they're like, hey, like, I know you're nervous about this procedure, but I performed a lot of these. I'm gonna take excellent care of you. Don't you worry about a thing. The nurse is gonna get you prepped up. We're gonna have you sign these paperworks, and then it's gonna be over in 30 minutes. That would make them feel a lot more comfortable. So when you think about voters, voters need the same exact thing. You know, they're nervous. This is their life. Like, think about how bad it is, like the right left paradigm where people are like literally thinking if their party doesn't win, like the whole country is going to fall apart. That's how they feel every single election. The Reds are saying if the Blues win, everything's going to go to crap. The Blues are saying if the Reds win, they're going to lose all of their social rights and everything like that. And people are very nervous. So if you don't make them feel comfortable, like how are they, it's just like, you know, offering to do like a procedure on them. Like, how are they going to feel comfortable, you know, if you're swearing and you're acting unprofessional and you look like you don't know what you're doing. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. There was a thing, who was it? It was George Washington, actually. So I did a podcast episode, I think, like no, in August, I think it was, about the two-party system.
Yeah.
I had a guest on, David Pollock is his name. He helped with the campaign down here for Corey Mills in Central Florida. And we talked about the two-party system and how like it needs to be, I guess you can't really, lack of a better term, we need to eliminate it. Like, we need more than just two main parties. The things that are in place right now for the system that keeps those two parties to be the majority parties, and all of that needs to be reworked to allow more, you know, more parties come in. You know, other countries have it, like Japan, England, and others. But one of the things Washington like warned against is whenever you get to a two-party system, the focus doesn't become about the people you represent. It becomes about maintaining power. And one of the things, like with the messaging for your party, whether you are like a Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Greene, all the other parties and stuff that are out there, like, you still need to state, and I think this is maybe the argument where you're in the Libertarian Party, it seems like, just like watching from the sidelines, where they're getting hung up is like they are so focused on staying true to their, I guess, their platform, that they are not willing to soften their language a bit to appeal to more people, probably maybe because they feel like then they're losing their principles of their platform and things like that. And I'm not advising, like with political messaging, to, they say like expand your tent. Well, you don't really want to expand your tent and lose your principles. You want to make it to where more people are coming in, because if you're just worried about expanding your tent and getting more people, then you're only concerned with power. And messaging is huge, because we heard about it in the 2020 election. A lot of people who maybe voted for Trump in 2016 and then didn't in 2020, you know, the whole thing about, ooh, how are those mean tweets now? You know, like, don't you wish you had those mean tweets? Like, messaging matters. I mean, it matters. Whether you want it to matter or not, it matters to, you know, 150 million people that vote, there are enough of them where it actually matters.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like you said, okay, my thing with the libertarian messaging, because I know what you're talking about, and it's like you don't have to widen the tent so far, but at a certain point, like we as libertarians, not Brian, Brian's not a libertarian, you guys. Brian is a Republican, but we as libertarians, like anyone who's a libertarian watching this and me myself, we have to accept that there is a framework for society right now, and we actually have to like work within that framework to an extent. We can't just say like we're going to abolish the Fed, we're going to abolish the ATF, we're going to abolish the Department of Education, like old day number one, you know, we're going to do away with the federal government, no borders. All those things don't make sense to the American people because they're so outside of our reality right now. Like, and I know there's a lot of people out there just trying to like open the, what'd you say? Do you live in where? Volusia? Where do you live, Brian? Do you want to share?
Oh, no, I'm not in Volusia County. I'm in Orange County. I'm in Orlando.
Yeah. So it's so outside reality to so many people that it doesn't make sense when you start to say those people are gone already. And the Fed, what does this mean? You know, taxation is theft. Like I'm gonna pay my taxes, you know? So I think to a certain extent, we have to use like the messaging of our platform that's a little bit more appealing to the wider audience. It doesn't have to change what it is, but there are definitely things in our platform that sound good to everyone. We don't have to adapt them at all. We just focus on those and the other things come later. So somebody said, what's the difference between Republicans and libertarians, please? I
remember seeing a nice little like infographic that compared Democrats, libertarians, and Republicans.
Does it have like circles, like a Venn diagram, or it's like the square that they use with like authoritarianism and stuff?
It was not a Venn diagram, but you could have turned it into one. Oh. With how they did it, it was more of just like basically 3 rectangles and like one for each party and kind of where there's overlap. So you could have turned it into a Venn diagram.
Yeah. So you want to go? Yeah, you want to explain
so I would say for Republicans are we are not anti-federal government. We, and more so now, maybe more than recent history, we believe that we're okay with the federal government. We don't believe it should be as large as it is. We want states to run as they're supposed to run with their authority and everything like that for the voter. We are okay with, I call them guardrails, like for society, a few more guardrails than like what the Libertarian Party is, you know, okay with.
Yeah.
But the Republican Party is okay with the federal government, but we want to shrink it, but not necessarily do away with it.
Yeah.
And then then you get into whole like other conservative principles and stuff like that within the Republican Party, but that's just going to muddy the water too much.
Yeah. So, and one thing that I would say is that if you look at like the Republican Party versus the Democrat Party, that's like a first place where you can kind of see the difference when it comes to like social issues. It's almost like if the Republicans want this, the Democrats want this. If the Democrats want this, the Republicans want that. So it's almost like they've divvied everything up. Oh, we like abortion, we don't like abortion, you know. There are some things that kind of classically, and they've started to kind of switch and everything, things like war and everything that are a little bit muddier. But for the most part, you know, it's kind of like almost polar opposites. So the Libertarian Party, you know, we like things from both sides, but basically because the principle is, you know, we want to have smallest government as possible. We want the most of the rights for the individuals. We want the government not to be like impeding on the rights of the individuals. Like you kind of mentioned, like very, very small federal government. Some people, and this is the thing with libertarianism, a lot of people lean towards anarchy or almost even say like true libertarianism would be anarchy. Of course, like as a political ideology, like we can't have that entirely when it comes to the party. We have to work within the Constitution and everything there. But it's pretty much all about the rights of the individual. Federal should be limited to infrastructure. Okay, Joe Hanush is really good. So he says libertarians don't like that both R's and D's aren't doing stuff we agree with on them on. Yeah, and that's okay. So let's go back to the two-party system that you were talking about, because George Washington never wanted the two-party system, but
he advised against it. Yeah,
did, and that was Alexander Hamilton. I mean, they were basically the fathers of the two-party system. Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson. Alexander Hamilton, he was the Federalist. Thomas Jefferson, he was the Anti-Federalist. One thing that I thought was really interesting that I actually think could like bring some healing to our country, nobody would ever go for this, is that back in the day, like when Thomas Jefferson won the presidential elections, I think in maybe the 1804 one, and Aaron Burr came in second, right? He ended up the person in second becomes the vice president. That was how they used to do it. Is that correct?
Maybe. Yeah, I'm not
Somebody,
an awesome historian. I'm not an awesome historian, but possibly.
I believe that was how it was because they were talking about like one of them was a Federalist, one of them was an anti-Federalist. Somebody weigh in here and let me know. But it seemed like the person that came in first was president, person that came in second was vice president. Let's see, remove political. Joe, answer us the question if that's exactly how it worked. But I was just reading. Yeah,
Correct.
that's correct.
There you go.
So I read these books, but they're kind of historical fiction, and they're like stories woven in and stuff and everything. Well, this one that I'm reading right now is about political sex scandals and the of all the presidents. But it kind of mentioned that, and I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Just imagine right now, and I think it actually references in the book. Like it would be like Hillary Clinton would be the vice president to Donald Trump. So I'm not saying that that's better or worse or anything, but would it make the parties work better together? Or would that have kind of eliminated a little bit of the two-party system? I don't know, but I thought it was interesting. And I was like, I wonder why we don't ever go back to that. Maybe because the other party, then they're trying to like get rid of him and impeach him all the time. So they put the person in.
Yeah, after 200 years, I'm sure
Like,
if it was never the way it is now, if it stayed the way it was, then it'd probably be completely different. There probably would be a lot of benefits to it, but today it would just be a whole lot of undermining.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was pretty interesting to think about that though. But they were basically Federalists, anti-Federalists, and that's kind of how things move forward. So I mean, I guess like Hamilton would have been the father then of basically the modern day Democratic Party, even though I know the parties kind of changed and came and went and stuff. And Jefferson would have been more like the father of the Republican Party, although the names kept switching back and forth.
Yeah.
Somebody said, "Oh, fancy President's Day shirt. Thank you. This is for my timey photos of my house. I don't know if I'm gonna wear it though because it's so bizarre, but I did order it off Amazon, and I was like, let me continue this look today." I thought that was the point of Libertarian Party, to think for yourself and not for a party. Yeah, we're just talking about kind of what we have now and how things have changed. All the government has been doing is eroding our rights, for sure. And that's one issue that I see a lot, is that basically like it's almost like nothing really changes, whether it's Democrat or Republican in office. And that's why I would really like to see things get better for the Libertarian Party and at least give like those other two parties a run for their money, because right now it almost seems like, things kind of, they get a little better, they get a little worse, but it's like ultimate, it's like zigzagging down to, well, like up. It's like worse with the Democrats, a little better with the, or maybe the opposite, but anyways, it's all leading to authoritarianism. That's the point. It's going there quicklier when we have Democrats and a little like more winding when we have Republicans, but that's the thing that's a little scary. 1804, the 12th Amendment changed the VP second placing. Oh, really? Okay, so that was right after that. They did not like how it worked, I guess. Huh? That was when they decided.
They're like, okay, we've had three elections. We're gonna go ahead and change that.
Well, somebody said there was
four elections.
Like an interesting story, actually. Jeff on the Right, like he's over on Twitter. He actually was conservative and he's libertarian, but he had sent me another book that I just ordered, and he was like, oh, something about like Aaron Burr, Thomas Jefferson, like their interaction, which I didn't know much about. So I ordered that book. So I'm excited to see if that kind of plays into that amendment.
So what do you think, going back to messaging, I guess, I don't want to focus like really on party messaging, but we were talking about like accepting things that are, I guess how society currently functions today, and kind of fitting within that. And like you can't just try to blow the doors off, like you were saying with your party, like, oh, we're gonna end the Fed, we're gonna end this, we're gonna end that, and that's just like shocks too many people because for a long time, all these systems have been in place and what have you. So just to remove them is going to create a lot of uncertainty, and people are going to think it's going to cause chaos, and people don't tend to like chaos, right? They want things to be as calm as possible. But so what do you? I guess we can go into, I guess, party. Where would you like to see a little more detail, I guess, about where do you like to see the libertarian messaging to be?
Okay, we can talk about that for a second. And then I want to talk about the Marjorie Taylor Greene thing, because that was an example of a Republican pushing the envelope too far. So we'll come back to that in a second, because it's very interesting. Jenna says, Bernie gives me anxiety. Bernie loves doing that. Yeah. I wonder if he's going to be back next time, if we're going to hear from Bernie yet again. Things like health freedom, things like gun rights, like those are really, really big platforms for the Libertarian Party. I think if we can actually make some headway in those directions and actually get things done, through like citizen lobbying at a state level, through working within the systems and stuff that we have, and just really like diving into those, I think that we can really help. Another area of messaging that I feel like the Libertarian Party is really missing out on is there's an exhaustion, of the American people when it comes to lobbying from big corporations. Like, people are starting to wake up and realize, like, wait a minute, Pfizer gave money to, the Democrats, but they also gave $1 million to Kentucky GOP. They gave,
they play both sides.
They play both sides. And so that is something, obviously the Libertarians haven't been getting any money because Pfizer's like, well, y'all aren't going to win, so we don't care about you. So you think, you're like, oh, that actually, I've done a Twitter poll, and I was surprised how many people were like, in the Libertarian, movement, that were like, oh yeah, the candidate should take the money. And I was like, well, this is one of those situations where you think it's a bad thing, but you can actually reframe it to be like for your good, because as people are starting to get sick of the fact that they feel like their politicians and representatives are bought off by big pharma or big industry, no matter what industry it is, they're going to want the people who are not bought off. And so there can be like a critical turning point where people are like, I'm just going to go and vote for the person that was not bought off by big pharma. The other thing that the Libertarian Party has to really focus on is this idea with the chart that I couldn't figure out how it will work. But this chart that goes towards authoritarianism that both parties are taking us along to, if we can get people to understand, like, it's not like they want you to think every single election is life or death. If the Republicans don't win in the House this time, then what's going to happen? The country's going to implode. You're going to lose all your money. Everything's going to be awful. So we have to make sure that they win. We can't lose this. Well, what happens? Okay, so the Republicans win, and things get worse a little slower, but they don't actually get better. They're like, oh, okay, they had a little bit new authoritarianism, but not as steep of a slope as if it was a Democrat. So if people start to see that and they start to have that aha moment, they might actually be able to say, I don't want any of that. And it doesn't matter if it happens a little faster, a little slower. I want the country to be better long term. And we're going to send a message to this party. And I really believe that we can, or to those parties, we can send a message, even if it's only getting 20% of the vote. We're going to vote third party, because that's going to make those other two parties be like, oh crap, like we have to get back in line. Now, of course, another thing is that there's a huge, like, people get so defeatist because they're like voter fraud and all this stuff. It doesn't matter, selections. And I'm like, well, that also might be just like a psyop. And in some cases, whatever, we don't know if it's true. Like, in some cases, maybe elections are stolen and stuff. But if you believe it all the time, it becomes a psyop, because it's not going to be true in every single election, So you have to, at a certain extent, have some belief that things can change. Otherwise, you're going to defeat yourself in your mind. Well, if you're defeated and you think it's a selection and your candidate, isn't going to win because the election's going to get stolen by this other person, then why not vote third party? Why not see if your vote actually does something by taking those votes and moving third party? If you're so sold that it's a selection and your person can't win and you're defeated and stuff, why not move towards the Libertarian Party and see what can happen? Like, can you get a chunk of vote that makes those other two parties nervous and act better? Like, or
when you say, sorry to interrupt you, when you say that, like, someone's defeated, do you mean that they don't vote?
No, no, like they will just have a defeatist attitude and be like,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to vote for Republican, but at the end of the day, like they're selected, you know, it's a selection, and, you know, they just think like that there's voter fraud too. Like I have a ton of Twitter
Yeah.
posts on this also. So I'm like, if you're that defeated and you think that it's going to be a selection, why not just vote third party then? What's stopping you at that point? But then they're like, well, but then there's also the fear of this is the worst possible thing that could ever happen, you know, if the Democrat wins. So they're like torn between these two like kind of neurotic states, and I'm like, we gotta pick. Like, either your vote
Yeah.
matters and you really think it's going to change stuff, or you accept it's really not, or you decide that your vote doesn't matter, and then you think maybe I better do something different with it to see if I can somehow get a different result. So
Yeah, I was gonna say when you were asking, you know, like just rhetorically asking the question, like, why not vote for third party? I was like, oh, well, it's going to go back to the whole fear thing, and that's why I asked for the clarification.
yeah,
Are you saying like they're fearful, or they're, you know, they say it's not going to matter and they're not voting, but if they're still voting, they're probably only voting with like their pessimistic
it's like
attitude
they think both of
and
them.
hopelessness because they're like okay, I can vote my party and at least put a vote like in, you know, into a drop in the bucket.
Yes,
But if I vote for third party, then there's no drop in the
yeah,
bucket. So it goes back to that fear mentality, where it's like, okay, well, I might not get the result I want, but I'm still putting, you know, my coin in whatever phrase you want to use. But if I put one in the third party, then I'm not putting anything towards the,
yeah.
you know, like the larger
They
vote.
don't
So
know which bad thing is true, but they like neurotically worry about both. You know what I mean? Like people literally worry about both. Like, oh, it's just a selection and it doesn't matter. They get defeated, but then they're also afraid of the outcome, so they still vote for that person. I'm like, well, why don't you just break the cycle if you really think it's a selection? You know, you obviously don't actually think that if you're then going to be like, I have to vote for my same party, even though things
yeah.
are actually getting better. So that's my
I have another aspect of political messaging that I want to talk to you about. And I was actually going to do my podcast episode for this week about it, and then I just got busy doing other stuff at night, so I didn't record it yet. But it has to do with, we've talked about political messaging and kind of like softening it up or making it fit within, you know, like how society works, and not trying to do like a shock and awe and you're going to scare people because systems have been in place for decades or centuries, you know, however long.
yeah.
But the other aspect of political messaging is the aspect from a voter perspective of, you know, every election cycle, it's the same old, like, especially when people, you know, when the politicians are standing, you know, they're stumping and everything else, and they're like, oh, you can trust this person, or hey, I'm going to do this, and making all these promises, and more likely than not keeping those promises if they are elected and stuff. So I guess my other side of the coin or other aspect of political messaging is, okay, as a voter, like actually holding these politicians accountable in the next election. But we see that doesn't always happen because you get a lot of people who maybe vote just like a single issue voter.
Yeah.
And even if they're not satisfied with, you know, what their representative or whatever is doing, as a whole, if their representative supports a single issue that, you know, and they're a single issue voter, they're going to vote for that person every single time. And that's how you get, one of the reasons why I think you get people in the, you know, the House or the Senate who have been there for like 20, 30, 40 years. And it's like, well, what have you done for me lately? Or like, and it's like, oh, well, you know, well, if I vote for this other party, you know, or this other candidate, then I'm going to lose this one single issue that I stand for, even that's most important to me, even though I know that, or I think that on a larger scale, the situation would improve for, you know, like for my city or my state or whatever. But they're beholden to this single issue, and then they don't hold the representatives accountable election to election, and then I think that's part of the problem, because you keep getting the same thing every single time.
Yeah.
So I think you're in agreement with me. There needs to be more accountability, or we as voters need to hold our elected officials accountable, and there needs to be consequences if they're not acting on our behalf.
Yeah, so I mean, I think though you at a certain point you have to say, if I voted for this person who took all this money from pharma, all this money from big industry, like you have to accept, like, do you really think that person works for you? Like, look at their donations, see where they all come from. And then it's like, you have to accept, like, this person's probably not working for me. Like, we need a reality check with ourselves too, not to be like, oh, why this person cares about me. Well, look at all the money that they're getting from these big interest groups and lobbying, and everything like that. You have to realize they're going to be beholden to those things. So it's like, we also need to take some accountability there and not vote for people that get tons of money from special interest groups or from lobbying. So I think that the one thing that we could do, because like I think Joe was saying, he votes to try to keep the incumbent accountable. So because like one thing that we could do that would be like the most important thing is term limits, because that would stop us from having those like gridlocked incumbents. Like when you have an incumbent, just like Pelosi, she's the incumbent, she's just sitting year after year. They're going to always have a higher chance of being reelected, you know, especially if that's like a strictly Republican or Democrat area. And then they can just, you know, sit there year after year after year. It's never gonna shake things up. You know, people are gonna say, oh, it's the evil I know versus the evil I don't, or that's the other party. So I think they really need to have term limits, and that would be the one thing that would actually make a difference. Now, other people talk about like, if you had a, you know, like Republican and say like a third party got like a good chunk of votes, that third party could maybe negotiate like, well, we'll drop out if you like in the polls, you know, we'll drop out if you promise to do X, Y, and Z for the people, you know, because this is what I'm running on and I'm promising it to them. So that people talk about ideas like that too as another way to try to hold them accountable. Now, what does that matter? I don't know. Like,
yeah, some of that I think happens. Like I remember, I guess in the 2020 election, like Bernie Sanders was leading, you know, and everything, and then the dude from South Carolina, what's his face, put like, you know, said he endorsed Joe Biden. I can't believe I can't remember his name right now, but anyway. And then after the South Carolina primary, Biden shot up and then like never looked back. But in order, and no, wait, this goes back to, I think, to Hillary Clinton and probably also Biden. But anyway, Bernie Sanders in both cases, he was taking so much of the vote, like in the primary, you know, leading up to the general. It's like, okay, well, I'll back out and endorse you and give you my people if you agree to, you know, implement these things when you're in power.
Exactly.
So we've seen that happen recently.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
So that would be another option. So something that so let's go. Can we talk about the Marjorie Taylor Greene stuff?
We can talk about whatever.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
So that was interesting because Marjorie Taylor Greene had made that comment, you know, it's time for a national divorce. But basically she wanted to just like kind of go to like an Articles of Confederation type of style, I guess. Like it would just be states' rights. All the states would do their own thing. We'd get rid of the Department of Education. We would get rid of not Homeland Defense, but it would just become like strictly defense. All things that sound good. But then she started to say some kind of wild stuff, in my opinion, where she was like, yeah, maybe the red states, like they would just fire all the LGBT teachers. I'm like, well, that's pretty different because just because that's his lifestyle at home, I mean, yeah, you could put restrictions of like, hey, you can't do X, Y, and Z at school anymore. This is not the way that we're conducting school. But I'm like, doesn't that become like a discrimination? So I guess we don't have discrimination anymore in her society. And then she wanted to say that like people could, you know, it'd be fine if red states were like, hey, you moved here, but as you know, and I don't know if this only applied to like registered Democrats, like moving to a red state, or if it was anyone moving from a blue state to a red state, but she'd be like, thought it was fine to say like, maybe you wouldn't be able to vote for 5 years. And that seemed really crazy to me. I was like, now that becomes like taxation and laws without representation, basically, you know, for 5 years. I guess you have the choice of whether or not you're going to move there, but it still seemed kind of absurd. So I wanted to know, because I thought I have so many Republicans on here, so many conservative, you know, followers, people that I am in contact with, like, so I really thought, I was like, oh goodness, all my Republican friends are going to think that this is a good idea because it favors red states. But I was blown away to realize that no one thought this was a good idea. Not
Yeah.
conservatives, not Democrats, not libertarians. And I was like, okay, like I felt like a renewed sense of like pride and I guess like belief in the American people. I was like, okay, no one thinks this is a good idea. Everyone realizes like it's a tool that could be a double-edged sword,
Yeah.
even if they kind of liked the sound of it and that it's unconstitutional. So I want to know, what are your thoughts there? What do you think about Marjorie Taylor Greene being kind of like that going over the line type of messaging? Like, do you think that that's productive, counterproductive? Did she make the Republican Party look good, bad, bring attention? Was it edgy and smart, or was it something that is going to make people back away? Like, what are your thoughts?
So she's like, I don't want to I don't want to say she's far right because that has like certain connotation with it, but she's like extreme in the Republican Party. Um, I don't think when she goes too far, like some of the things it's like okay, like that kind of maybe makes sense, but then like you just keep going and going until you fall off the cliff and be more and more radical with what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think that hurts the Republican Party because it just gives what's the word fodder, is that the right term, for like the media,
Yeah.
the liberal media, and everything that is against, everything the Republican Party stands for. It gives them material and more material for them to convince their own, viewers and stuff like that. Like, you should never even entertain voting Republican, or voting anything other than for the Democrat Party, because I mean, look how crazy she is, and that's how they all are. It's
Yeah.
just like it's free anti-Republican Party media when things like that, whether she says it or anybody says anything really radical
Like it's too polarizing.
and extreme. Yeah, it's too polarizing. It's not necessary. I know I guess she's like in a super red district, I think, in Georgia. She probably also says these things because she wants to, be in the news, right, and stay relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah, clickbait stuff. But no, all in all, I would say it hurts the party because it just gives, easy ammunition for Democrats and the liberal media to cast every single Republican in that light.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that. It's almost like doing a disservice to the party.
And
Which
that's
is
why I think she gets like scolded, basically.
yeah.
Like what in the world are you doing?
Yeah. It's almost like a big game though. Sometimes you don't really know like what they want, what their real goal is. I thought it was interesting actually because like I'm from Washington State. Washington State is very blue, obviously not the entire state, but like the area I'm from is very blue.
Right.
I know a lot of Democrats and stuff. And one thing that I've heard is that people, they're disillusioned with the Democratic Party, but they also could never bring themselves to vote Republican. Now, I'm not going to lie and pretend that this wasn't a factor for me too. Like, instead of going totally, I was already a Republican, already a registered Republican, but instead of like wanting to dive into the Republican Party, like I found the Libertarian Party and it was new, it was different, it was like all the principles that I believed in, but it also was like something I could see people being attracted to from both sides. Does that make sense? Like I didn't ever even think like blue voters are going to become red voters, like unless like something crazy happens. But especially if they live in a blue area, like would they really feel comfortable making like a full 180? Probably not. So it's almost like the Libertarian Party could be like the gateway party. It's like how marijuana is like a gateway drug. Not saying like on the way to the Republican, but it's like people would actually feel comfortable dipping their toe in it. Like people wouldn't be like, I'm gonna start trying heroin today, but they are like, I'm gonna try marijuana, and then they're like, marijuana is a nice lifestyle. I actually like it. It made everything better,
Right.
So I feel like, there's actually that chance for the Libertarian Party, whereas like I don't think like a lot of blue voters are going to turn red. Unless they were like secretly conservative inside anyways and just happened to live in a blue area and then they just got like sick of it. marijuana isn't a gateway drug. Oh no. It was just a joke. It's okay. Like I don't
You
think we're a gateway party either. It's
just
just
lost
like
one. You just lost a follower, Kaleena.
I know,
Sorry.
I know. Everyone block and delete me right now. Okay, just vote me out.
Um,
Vote me out of the party. Wait, but what I was gonna say is oh, I forgot. But yeah, anyways, you get the point. So
yeah.
it is the type of thing where you can, oh, that's what I was gonna say. The Libertarian Party, where it messes up the most, in my opinion, is like, okay, we have a lot of red, like red leaning. I guess we're all gold, but we have a lot of conservative leaning libertarians, especially right now. Everyone wants to be even more conservative, like government wise, than the Republican Party, right? But what happens when you're like, Republican style messaging? It's all like, Second Amendment and small government and everything,
Lower taxes
lower
and all that
taxes.
stuff.
So where do you get your voters from then? You get you're stealing voters from the party that you like better. It doesn't make any sense. So if you actually want either that party to win because you think it's better or your own party to win, shouldn't you appeal to the things that are actually blue voters are voting for? Wouldn't that be smart? Like, it doesn't make any sense if you have 50-50 and you're just cutting off the pie that's the side you like better because you're very right leaning. Like, what did you accomplish? Nothing. You actually made that party lose, which is what we get accused of a lot. But the Libertarian Party has a whole other side to it, legal drugs. Sex work is work for adults, like for consensual adults. Um, all those things. Like we have like a lot of social issues that are more left leaning and I don't like abortion. Like I am pro life, but we do have a platform for, choice, like, and that kind of fits the party mold. There is ways
Hmm.
that people talk about that makes the party kind of more lean towards like a pro-choice approach, without like a lot of government funding involved. Wouldn't it make sense to appeal to those people on the side that politically you really disagree with the most, knowing that our social platforms are a lot more encompassing? We're not like gonna say you can't have LGBT teachers at a school. Like that wouldn't be a libertarian thing. I mean, I guess they can say freedom of association and stuff, but that's my point, is like, why are you only trying to grab the voters from the side that you government wise like better, and you're just like alienating these people? It's like, didn't you just, now you made them win?
Yeah.
So that is, let's see, LGBT deleted the abortion plank last year. Yeah, and I am pro life, but there are people that are in the Democratic Party just because they're pro choice.
Single
And
issue. Yeah.
they're single issue voters. They're women, a lots of times, and they could come with soft messaging, understanding what, like, raising your kids how you want, doing all these things how you want, less taxes, all that stuff. They could become libertarian voters. They're not going to become Republican voters. So my point is that if that is part of the party, line of thinking, which, like I said, I lean more conservative, why would you alienate them from voting? So either way, government shouldn't be involved. Exactly. And if that's how we actually feel, then we actually have to appeal to those people, even if we feel like inside we disagree with them, because that is actually going to bring, you said I'm pro-choice across the board. Yeah. So wouldn't that would be better messaging for the Libertarian Party, and more beneficial to both the Libertarian Party and the Republican Party, that we feel like a lot of people in our party say they like better? Why don't you want the blue voters? Those are the voters you
Yeah.
want. That don't make any sense, but
Yeah.
I went on.
In my opinion, responding to Jenna down there, and I've seen this for a popular guy. I think he goes by like the older millennial or something like that on TikTok. He calls himself a pro-choice conservative, and in my opinion, you can't be a conservative and be pro-choice.
Yeah.
But also then in my opinion, regarding the Libertarian Party and going back to the two-party system, the way everything is set up now for our elections, Libertarian Party will never become president, in my opinion. And the reason is because has to be too much trust from one person to the next, one voter to the next, to be able to say, okay, like collectively, let's all commit to electing third party to then put it over the top of either candidate from the two other major parties. I don't think there has to be like a significant trust factor in order for someone to be like, all right, I'm gonna give up my normal vote because now I'm like I associate myself with the Libertarian Party, but I know when it comes like federal election time that there aren't enough of them, and I don't think there is enough trust from person to person in our country to, based on the current structures, like again, like how elections are set up, for a libertarian to ever become president. You would have to redo like the whole election system for that to happen.
But that's where I try to say that the only thing that can happen is, Joe says, gotta push the Overton window. I think if enough people start to realize, first of all, that I mean, although granted, like they've started to get into these like executive orders and stuff, but I think if people start to realize, like, you know, Biden does socialism, Trump does socialism. Biden pushes the V product, Trump pushes the V product. Like if they start to realize that the sameness between those enough, and it gets maybe even worse, like who knows, say we get another Republican next time and things don't actually move back the way that people had hoped they were, there could be an exhaustion where I feel like a lot of people would actually move third party. Like if they can see that the result is basically like, what do they call it, 6 or half a dozen, then there could be a change. But it takes enough people, a critical mass of people seeing that. That's not something that's outlandish to believe, because that happens in things all the time. You know, constantly there's social issues and stuff where all of a sudden critical mass starts to believe something and it totally changes, you know? So I don't think it's outlandish. The other thing that I think is that we have to remember, but going back to, there's something else we have to talk about after this, but you only really need 30% if there are 3 candidates. So, you know, if the Libertarian Party did try to get like, you know, and I said this before and people were like, well, that it wouldn't be 15% of the time, 15% total of the total vote from each side, then they would actually have a chance. And so I think if they got even close to that at a federal level election, like people would start to like see it as a viable option. The other thing though is that I think somebody was telling me, like when candidates go to the electoral college, like the number to win is like half. Like it wouldn't be like there could be 3 candidates. Now that's not something I understand really well. Like it's like they need a certain number to win, and that number is like almost half. Is that correct? Do you know much about how that would work?
You have to get 50% plus 1, like in the electoral.
So it's
college,
like,
which is like the total number is like 277 or something like that.
But yeah, so that would be like something that would be very confusing if there were 3 candidates that all had nearly 30%, you know? So how would that be dealt with? I don't know, you know, be interesting.
I think certain states, like regarding electoral college, I think certain states, they're able to divide up their votes, their electoral college votes. So it's not just like winner take all, like it is in, I think like it is in most states. They could actually divide it up, but again, you'd have to have like a whole revamp, restructuring of the election system. So.
And they would still in some way be going against their voters, because otherwise the max that somebody could get would be like a third, you know, of that, the whole number. So it wouldn't make any sense. But I don't know exactly how they would do that. It is 9:04 though here, which I know it's like 10:04 there. So I do want to wrap it up pretty quick.
Yeah, I didn't even realize an hour went by.
And it was up.
So
I'm like, we got
the old band back together.
Yes. We need to do it all the time now.